Okay, I don't want to take too much of anybody else's time. There may still be some people joining us in the next few minutes, but I think I'd like to go ahead and get started. So my name is Blaise Bova. I'm the Executive Director of St. Vincent de Paul of Alameda County. We also have a lot of representatives, some representatives here from St. Vincent de Paul of Contra Costa County. This is kind of an East Bay thing. I want to thank everyone for attending. We have an hour, so it'll be a pretty quick moving thing. This is an open forum, Who is My Neighbor, which refers to the neighbors that we at St. Vincent de Paul help when they are needing eviction prevention. I want to start, and I know a lot of our Vincentians in the audience are very familiar with this already, but I want to take a few minutes just to let folks who may not know what an impact St. Vincent de Paul has on people who are struggling to stay in their housing. Eviction prevention is a huge part of St. Vincent de Paul's work. In addition to operating the largest charity dining room in the East Bay here at St. Vincent de Paul in Oakland, and the largest emergency shelter in the East Bay, and several other programs. One of the things that we do that very few people know about is that we have a network of local chapters. We call them conferences. Here in Alameda County, we have 36 of them. I think there's almost that many in Contra Costa County, around 30. And each of those local chapters is run entirely by volunteers. They have no staff and almost no overhead expenses. And they raise their own funding with a little help from the Catholic parish that they're associated with. And with the pastor's blessing, they can take up collections, second collections every quarter or so, quite often. It varies from group to group. And they take calls from people in their own neighborhoods who live within those parish boundaries, regardless of faith, of course, or any other lack of faith, anything. Anyone in need can ask for help from the local volunteers in the chapter of St. Vincent de Paul that's nearest them. And typically what our volunteers, who are called Vincentians, do is pair up, and in a team of 2 people, they will go to the person's home who's asking for help, and we can bring food to them for one, and then we'll sit down in their home and talk about other needs that that family may have. And it might be anything from pots and pans to, if one of their kids are sleeping on the floor, we could provide them a bed from our thrift store at no cost, or a dining room table if they need it. And one of the most impactful things that we can do is help with a rent or utility bill that's behind. Each chapter, each conference makes their own assessment decisions on how best to use their own limited funding to help as many people as they can in their neighborhood in significant ways. And so we often use a guideline that I think of as crisis and sustainability. And typically, or most often, when a family can show us that they have a reason that they're behind on this month's rent, thus a crisis, maybe it's a hospital bill, a temporary layoff, some other unexpected expense, a car breakdown, and when the family can show us that they will be okay to pay their own rent next month, that's an ideal situation. When we can see that paying a month's rent or half a month's rent, splitting it with them, can literally get them past a crisis and back to a point where they're doing fine on their own again. And that's one of the best and most important things we do, the most significant, that we're literally keeping families off the streets, keeping them in their homes, and not letting them become another homeless person or another homeless family in our county, in our area. It's incredibly important work, and it's done on a bigger scale than most people realize. Just here in Alameda County, our 36 or so conferences collectively spend close to $1 million a year, over $900,000 a year, on these kinds of rent and utility payments for families who need them. In amounts typically anywhere from $500 to $1,000 at a time. We often pay bills of $600 or $700. We're going to talk later about how the quantities that people are needing now, as they're so far behind in their rent. But under normal circumstances, this is an amazing way to help people stay in their homes for a very small contribution of money. And it does it with almost no overhead because it's done purely by volunteers. So when a donor writes a $500 check, that donor knows that all 500 of those dollars are literally going to go to keep someone in their home or to keep the lights on. So it's an incredible thing, a very untold story that we love to take every chance we can to tell that story. It's an amazing model, and it works that way in St. Vincent de Paul chapters all over the world. That's one of the main things that we do. So we are more expert than one might think, especially collectively among all of our, in Alameda County, all of our 700 or 800 volunteers, all of whom have sat down with people in their living rooms, really talked through their situation with rent, with what's causing them to be behind, with what they see in their future. And that's why this event this morning is rather unique, because most of the people in the audience, I would say, do that kind of work. They are volunteers. They are members of St. Vincent de Paul. They know how to do home visits. They've talked to people needing help with rent and utilities. They've helped people. They've kept people in their homes. Everything is turned upside down since the coronavirus came on the scene. And thankfully, we do have such things as the eviction moratoria that have been put in place in most local jurisdictions, as well as in the county and the state. And they're starting to end now. So that's why we're getting together to share our information, what we know and what we need to know about how to help people now who have been benefiting from the eviction prevention, from the moratoria, but who may now be needing to pay even more rent than they might have before, because it's not forgiven, it's just a moratorium. It's only been delayed. So there are three people that I'd like to introduce who will be doing a fair amount of the speaking here, but I do want to encourage everyone to see this as an open forum. Again, there's a lot of expertise in the room, so we want to give every chance we can for people to have a chance to ask questions, but also to answer questions. I don't want anyone to be shy about putting in something, adding to an answer or providing an answer that they have familiarity with, because there's a great level of expertise in the audience here today. So I'm going to introduce two people from St. Vincent de Paul here in Alameda County. I should also mention that there's a wonderful key staff person with us from Contra Costa County, Stephen Crank, who coordinates all of the local chapters of Vincentians in Contra Costa County. And he's joined us as well. But the two that will be doing a little bit more speaking than most perhaps are John Proctor, who is our Vincentian support coordinator, who works with all of our local chapters in terms of helping them get trained and get the data of the work that they're doing to our central office and help support them and organize them with meetings and that sort of thing. That's John Proctor. And then Jackie Mallory, who's with us, runs our phone center. She's done it remotely since the pandemic started, which is a wonderful thing, so that she's able to stay safe at home. And she takes calls from people needing help all over the county. And many of the calls are from people who've benefited from the moratorium, but are now a little bit panicking because they're further behind on their rent than they realized. And the other thing is the tip of the iceberg that we're dealing with. We don't even yet know how many people have not even reached out to us yet, because they've felt like it's okay, I don't have to pay my rent right now, but they're going to have to. So I'd like John and Jackie to provide a lot of their expertise to the group here today, if at all possible. And the third person that I want to introduce is going to be our first speaker, and I want to give her 15 or 20 minutes to talk. This is Emma Ishii. She is the Social Services Policy Associate for Supervisor Keith Carson in District 5 of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. And I will, at this point, I think, turn the floor over to Emma to tell us what she knows about the moratorium in Alameda County and what that looks like as we move forward. So thank you very much for joining us, Emma.
Okay, thank you so much, Blaze, for having me. And I hope that I can provide you all with some more information and things that you can refer your to. Like Blaze said, my name is Emma Ishii, and I work for Supervisor Carson, Alameda County. I'm going to be splitting my presentation into three different sections. So the first one really is just to answer the question, what is the current legislation now, and how does it relate to the state eviction moratorium? And then I'm going to talk about what support is available for residents in Alameda County, either financial or legal. And then I'm going to sort of end on sort of getting at the question, what's next, and what relief we can possibly look out for in the future. And I don't really have that much information about what's going on in Contra Costa County, but maybe I can give Stefan some time at the end to talk about that, because I'm more so focused on the county. So to begin with, yes, the California state eviction moratorium is set to end at the end of this month, but that Alameda County's eviction moratorium is actually still active. So I just want to say that again, that the Alameda County eviction moratorium is still active until February 28th, or 60 days after the end of the local health emergency. And really what that means is that the eviction moratorium is reliant on the state of the pandemic in our county. So right now, we still really are seeing a large amount of infections and also hospitalizations. And so we're still currently in the local health emergency period. Just another thing that sets Alameda County's eviction moratorium aside from the states is that it covers many more types of renters than the state's eviction moratorium. So there isn't a burden of proof at all for residents on hardship experienced during COVID. And so this means that they don't have to produce any burden of proof that maybe that they've lost their job, or that they've been tested positive with COVID. So it creates a lot lower barriers for people who are trying to stay housed. And also, I wanted to note that our county's eviction moratorium also covers the unincorporated areas of our county. I'm not sure exactly where you all are located, but the unincorporated area includes Ashland, Cherryland, Castro Valley, and a few other cities. I also want to say that I was thinking about sending my notes over to you all afterwards, so you don't have to capture every single thing I'm saying, because I know it's a lot of information. And so then I do want to say next that cities have also passed their eviction moratoriums, and that can be a little bit confusing. But really what the legislation says is that whichever moratorium is strongest is the moratorium that takes precedent. So for example, in the city of Oakland, let's just say if their payment period is 24 months and the county's is 12 months, the cities would take precedent, if that makes sense. I do want to say that for like more specific questions like that on which moratorium applies to me, like am I covered, I would really encourage you all to refer your community members to one of our legal organizations that we contract with. You all may have heard of some of them, but the ones that we usually refer people to include Centro Legal de la Raza and East Bay Community Law Center, and a few others. Sorry, I'll try to slow down. Yeah, so and then I can make sure to get you all those contacts at the end so that you can have a list for your residents. Okay, so what support is available by the county? Even though we oversee the operations in the entire county, our statutory responsibility is in the unincorporated areas. So we've actually contributed $5 million of rental assistance for renters in the unincorporated areas, paid for by the CARES Act. But we also have, since the beginning of the pandemic, have infused like $3.5 million for renters across the county for rental assistance. You know, I'm sure Jackie has received calls like this before, but you know, renters can get assistance with many things, including like navigating the language of the moratoriums, negotiating rental payments with their landlords, or even getting legal defense for eviction cases. Those are all things that our contracted organizations can help your residents with directly. For example, City of Oakland has a $5 million fund for Keep Oakland Housed, which has a lot of similar services that we offer. Okay, so what's next? And I think that this is the section where people have a lot of questions about, because there's so many unknowns that I feel like we're all experiencing generally due to the pandemic. So I'm going to start at the federal level, and then I'll go to the state, and then I'll go to the county. Federally, I did want to mention that there was recent legislation that established $25 billion for emergency rental assistance and utility assistance. That's for like the entire nation. Sorry about the sound. We don't actually know the details yet. $29 million coming to our county for direct rental assistance. So that's still information to that my video stalled. Maybe I can just
Looks like
emergency rental assistance.
Your video is cutting in, or your audio is cutting in and out, Emma. I'm not sure if you're just on a slower internet connection or a little bit of a spotty one.
Just in.
No, I think that's not going so well.
Sorry, I think that my internet connected. My internet cut out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Feel free to go back over what you were trying to say in the last minute or two, because it's been a little bit spotty.
Okay, sorry about that. I think it's just my home internet. I really just wanted to say that there's recent federal assistance that has been announced. $25 billion from the federal government is set to be distributed like throughout the nation. We're still getting more details about how much money will be coming to Alameda County, but they're anticipating approximately like $29 million. So that's information that's still to come, but I think it's promising in terms of what it might do to assess people over here. And then at the state level, I know that there's been a lot going on because it's the governor's, governor just recently released his budget. Level who have really been pushing for new rental assistance and relief. For example, David Chu, he's an assembly member from San Francisco. He recently announced AB 15, which would protect renters all the way through 2021, and also would allow local areas to extend their payment periods for a longer time period. And I think that would be a really big change and a really big benefit for us locally, because as we know, the economy really just hasn't gotten back to the place that it was from the beginning of this whole pandemic. With that bill going on, the governor actually announced his support for that legislation. So I think we can see hopefully some relief coming from the state level soon. And then at the county level, we're really focused on trying to, begin our vaccine rollouts, and also to just keep infection rates down. Like, that is definitely our priority. And we'll be really trying to, I guess you would say, to lobby at the state and federal level for any assistance moving forward. Potentially, if the pandemic continues into summer, we could revisit the legislation that we have now in our eviction moratorium ordinance. And we really want to make sure that that will be an open process. And so I just want to put that out there, that I'm really open to hearing what you all have been experiencing, and also if you have any suggestions about what should happen next in terms of our policies. With that, I think I just want to end and also just say that I'm happy to answer any questions or go over anything again, because I know that it's a lot of information. So, yeah.
There we go. Thank you very much, Emma. We appreciate that. And I see that John Proctor has joined us from the other one of these meetings. Apparently, I don't know if the link had changed or what happened, but there were 4 or 5 people in a different meeting that hopefully will all find their way back to this one. They were attempting to come into our meeting and wound up in a different spot somehow, and John was one of them. So he's joined us. I think he's unmuted now. And I do want to move this into very much an open forum where we can all ask questions and we can all answer questions from our own experiences and our own expertise as people who are working with folks in this situation. But I think before I do that, Jackie, if you don't mind, I might put you on the spot just to give a little different perspective as someone who's heard from so many of the constituents of the families that we serve who are now starting to reach out to us for help. A month ago, Jackie's perspective was largely from her own knowledge of what was destined to happen, but she wasn't getting a lot of calls because people were feeling like things are okay right now. They're not being forced to pay their rent. But I think we've turned that corner, and I know Jackie's really starting to experience a lot of calls from people in various degrees of trouble around the situation who aren't sure what to do. So Jackie, could you take just a minute or two and just give us a little bit of the color of that and how it sounds and how people are feeling out there? And you're muted, Jackie.
Yes, right now people are starting to panic because they think that it's coming to the end. There may not be any relief happening for them. People who have tried to get unemployment, they're facing issues with the unemployment snafu and unemployment actually giving people their award and then taking the award back overnight. That's one of the situations. Another situation is that people are afraid that they're just not going to be able to maintain this. much longer. Even if the moratorium is extended, what kind of relief will they be able to get? And they're starting to panic. One woman, 5 children, husband's been laid off, she's been laid off. They've been trying to struggle with unemployment payments, but it's not enough to cover the Bay Area's rent. The Bay Area's rent is very high. So that's the kind of panic in people's voices, that they don't want to become homeless. They do want to be able to pay their rent. They always have been able to, but they have experienced long-term things happening since March of 2020, basically. So one of the things is, even if they are able to get a little bit of relief from the Alameda County, say, their rent is not going to be forgiven. So what's the picture going to look like, even if the governor extends it out to the end of the year? So Emma, I don't know if that's something that you can address, but that's a real concern, that we've almost been a year into this and they've only been able to pay a portion of it. St. Vincent de Paul has helped very many people pay a portion, but they still have this high bill in front of them. And now we hear that the governor is talking about extending it until the end of the year.
Jackie, could I add to that? It's
Yes.
not really clear in the language of the text for the extension, but the sense that I get is that 25, it says the 25% of their total rent. So I kind of interpret that conservatively to mean that it goes back to all the unpaid rent, beginning with the very first eviction moratorium.
Yeah, but the declaration, the latest declaration that came out was only from September to January.
Right, and so the one they're talking about extending it through the end of 2021, and then it says that to qualify, by then they will have to have paid 25% of their total rent. So
total rent starting with March of 2020.
that's what I think it means, yeah. And they'll be covered until January 1st, 2022.
Okay. But still, if people aren't back to work, or their jobs have been changed, or the company's closed, or the businesses is closed, then that means that they are unemployed. They will continue to be unemployed. Their unemployment benefits may dry up. What happens with that entire bill?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think one potential place that could be positive for renters would be the possibility to extend the payment period. I haven't looked at the specific language. I saw that Meg put it in there, but I think it allows the local jurisdictions to actually extend the payment period, and maybe that could be somewhat of a help, but I understand. So like the total number period is like really significant.
Right.
So that's something we need to look at.
Jackie, I think that the extension to the end of the year would have to be approved by the legislature and not just by the governor.
Yes,
It does have to be approved.
that's correct.
We're saying if they do decide to do that, because that is talk now, that they're planning on, they do have support to try and extend it. If it does get extended, that means that there's almost a 2-year bill for rent there. Because we're talking about going back from March of 2020, March of 21 is in a couple of months, and then we're talking the end of this year. So we're talking 18, 19 months of non-payment of rent at, the rents here in the Bay Area, Alameda, Oakland, Berkeley.
Excuse me.
Yes, this is Assemblyman David Chu had proposed legislation over in December that Governor Newsom has decided to support. And he decided on last Wednesday to go ahead and do this. So this all has to go through the legislature.
Right.
And they're going to be using a combination. Well, they're going to be using some of the funds that was already provided to California as part of the federal relief, and then some of the state's funds, and they want to release it immediately for renters. And then there's also another 1.2 billion that's going to entitlement jurisdictions, and then there's also other protections for small property owners as well.
Yeah, I think that the small property owners is definitely an important thing to try to pass along with it, because I know that you know, because if they actually lose their housing, then it could, you know, displace people.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was curious personally if any of you have heard from small landlords that are struggling at this point with the lack of rent that they haven't been able to get, and how they've been able to pay their mortgage or not. Jackie, for example, have you gotten calls from people asking for mortgage assistance in that situation?
Yes, and I had one experience with a landlord who actually, she physically lives in San Leandro, but she owns a building in Oakland. And neither one of the tenants, it's a duplex, neither tenant was paying rent and hadn't paid rent for months. And she was struggling trying to get a mortgage forbearance on the property. I don't know how it turned out, but that's another scenario. If you're not getting renters to pay the rent, then how do you pay the mortgage on that property? It was a good thing that she wasn't living there. She did have another place to live for herself, but the two tenants in the duplex, she was behind on the mortgage payment to Wells Fargo.
Is anyone aware in California or in our county, 2 counties representative, that there has been or might soon be specific assistance to landlords, either struggling to pay their mortgage because of their own unemployment, or if their tenants are not paying their rent?
So we had, I'm Steve with Contra Costa County. We had, there was an executive order N-8020 that extended the commercial, prohibiting the eviction of commercial tenants through March of 2021 at this point. You know, I think, you know, I almost wish that we had this this meeting a week later, because hopefully with actually getting some leadership in Washington, that I believe that that's going to impact the people that we're serving quite a bit. You know, we're in the same boat where it's a wait and see. You know, one thing that we know for sure is that the problem is bigger than we are, and we can't fix the whole thing, and we can't fix every family completely, but we can do what we can do to try and help the ones that we can do. So the Vincentian thing, you don't look at the line of people, you look at taking people one at a time and families one at a time. And Vincentians, you know, all over the Bay Area are going through the same thing, which is, you know, we care about the people that we're serving. And I think that we've brought that into our relationships, whether we're doing, you know, home visits with 2 people on the, you know, on a conference call, or, you know, we have people that they saw the moratorium as a way to not have to pay rent. And then we have people that, you know, we had one family where you had multiple generations, a Latino family, they were all living in one house, and they all worked for the same restaurant. The restaurant closed. Now they managed to pay their rent up until like November, just cobbling together between everybody in the family. And they came to us and they said, can you help us with 2 months rent so we can get paid, get caught up? I just think that that's really worth supporting, that kind of, that kind of effort, as opposed to the people that took it as a license to not, hey, I don't have to pay rent, so I'm not going to worry about it. So, but I really appreciate, Jackie and Emma and John's input. I think there's a lot of stuff coming, hopefully by next Wednesday.
Yeah, that's thanks, Steve. That's a common misperception, is that this was like a rent strike or something like that, which it was not. And to your point earlier about, well, that you just made about federal government, what California is doing here is they were originally going to try to match what the federal government was providing. So this also includes a $600 check so that people would have $1,200 and whatnot. And they're trying to, and I don't know what the update is this moment, but they're trying to pass this as quickly as possible to head off the 31st, not knowing what the federal government is going to do. And I do share your optimism, your hope that the attitude will change very shortly at the federal level. I just don't think a lot of people realize the urgency of all of this, and everybody was sort of distracted by the $600, not realizing that at the federal level, there was a lot of money in there to help individual renters, people with mortgages, and also small property owners. And it all got hung up. It all became derailed, as we see.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the ask that we're having a year ago. The average ask for rental assistance was like $1,000. Right now it's 6,000.
Yeah.
That's the average. Is 6,000. We've had a high of 18,000. And it is the reality. And it is, it can be frustrating for Vincentians because it's daunting. You can't, but that doesn't keep us from doing what we can do. Right?
Yes.
And
do what we can.
And prayer.
I have a question for you, because I know that sounds like it can be very, difficult to not be able to give people what they actually need. But have the people who've been requesting those amounts, have they had discussions with their landlords? I'm wondering, because I know that there's some ways that if you certain tenants, if they talk to their landlords, they can work out some type of like a payment plan. Like, have they? I'm just wondering if that's
Some of the
we encourage that. Yeah, Vincentians do.
I mean, some
Steven,
of the
sorry.
What we've been the premise that we've been moving forward on is if we can use the protections that are in place, which covers them through, the 25% starting in September, that at least protects them through the end of January. That's what we've been trying to cover first, because by covering that first, at least they're sheltered. Then the second premise is that the debt that was accrued prior to September 1st is probably going to wind up at small claims court anyhow. And there's some interesting language in the use of the COVID letter, which is the Family Law Center did a workshop on it, where unless the tenant writes the month that the check is for with the COVID letter and submits it monthly, the landlord can apply those checks to the in arrears, and then it automatically becomes just cause for eviction, which circumvents all of the protections.
And that's in Contra Costa County, right?
That is, if you look at the COVID letter, the way it's written. And this came from their experience, where they've been taking on cases where they wrote a check for 25% with the COVID letter, did not have the fact that this was for September on their check. The landlord put it to the money that they owed from March and began the proceedings to try and get them evicted. And that's considered just cause, which is non-payment of rent. So it goes around the protections. So I hope I
Yeah,
helped more than her.
I know I just want to clarify, I think that in Alameda County, I think all evictions, like, I don't think that there's a burden of proof. I mean, it might be different in Contra Costa County, but I don't think they actually have to prove hardship through like a letter.
No, what we've been doing is the COVID letter, the COVID impact letter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the COVID impact letter, because everything, almost all of these people that have not been able to pay rent, of course, have been impacted by COVID. So the COVID, by providing the COVID letter, it supports the mechanism for eviction protection, because that's a justifiable reason. And there's a protection, a legal protection based on that. But there is some fine print, which is, you know, some landlords don't have the same compassion, and they saw it as a way to, oh, well, if I just apply this to March, then this is just cause. So
I would like at this point to really open up our dialogue to anyone in the room. As I mentioned at the beginning, I think all of us have expertise from our own experiences in doing this work. It's a good sized crowd here. We have almost 40, but I think you feel free to use the raise hand function if you'd feel more comfortable, but I think we can keep doing what we've been doing, which is just try to politely jump in when you hear a moment, to either say something that comes from your experience or to ask, put a question out either to a particular person or to the whole group. I see Francisco Nieto and Dennis Ducey both have their hands up. Dennis, let me take you first because I think you asked at the very beginning.
I actually have a couple questions for Kim, and not Kim, Emma. Especially, you mentioned federal, state, and local. Sounds like the federal is TBD, and for that matter, the state too. What is going to be, in your experience, the best source? Okay, when things happen, how can we find out what's the latest and greatest, if you will, when things are coming down and are very, very applicable to us? That's one question. The other question is, we're talking about people who are on the verge of homelessness. What about the people who are homeless now and are on the verge of getting into a place? Is there any assistance or looking at that? In other words, somebody needs X amount of money for a rent deposit. They just can't come up with the total amount. Is there anything out there in that regard? So those are my two questions, somewhat related.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, those are great questions. So I mean, I think on your about sort of like getting the up to date information on what's happening. I really would. I think I would probably refer you to the governor, the governor's website. He actually has maybe not totally relevant to the work you all do. I mean, there might be some extra stuff, but he has press conferences at noon pretty regularly during the week, and he'll go over like vaccinations, like the efforts on his budget, and COVID response. So I would say he is a really good source of information right now. In terms of legislation, I would sign up for, if you all have assembly members or local senators, I would sign up for their newsletters and encourage you to reach out to their staff. Like if you want to learn more about what's happening, they're usually really open to answering questions like that. Yeah, so I think that that's what I would recommend in terms of the information. It is hard to keep up sometimes because there's always changes that happen, or there's like new things added to the bill, so it can be a little bit confusing. And then in terms of homelessness, yeah, I mean, I didn't actually cover all of the assistance that the county's been offering on homelessness, but we used a large portion of our CARES Act money that we received from the federal government. We're using a lot of it for rental subsidies, and it does cover the things that you were mentioning, like first month's rent or like moving expenses, and in terms of how people can access that funding, a lot of the times I would suggest them to go through the coordinated entry system and calling 211. I'm actually really curious to hear from you all if you've referred your community members over there and sort of like what their experience has been, because I know sometimes it can be hard to actually get the resource. So I'm curious what that's been like.
We get a lot of our calls referred to us from 211, so a lot of,
Mhm.
Exactly.
people start there and then find their way to us.
Right.
Oh, okay.
We're at the top of their list, I think, when people are looking for help with eviction prevention.
Got it.
Now, we're
And then,
sources that they call first.
mhm.
They'll
And then
tell-
if you all can't handle like if it's like a large amount of money or something, do you guys refer it back over to somebody else, or how does that work? I'm just curious.
Jackie?
When they call up, and I know that it's, this morning, actually, someone called, they need $4,050. I would refer them to, we would see if there's some part of that we can do, but my encouragement to that person would be to call their landlord first and talk to the landlord and see if they could set up a plan to repay part of it if they get a down payment. And then I referred her to the East Bay Law Center because she did have some legal issues that she needed to resolve that I know we couldn't resolve it for her. The East Bay Community Law Center could give her more, from a legal perspective, what she should do. But that's our protocol when they first call and we know that it's higher amount than what we can afford to do. We will try to ask them to please contact the landlord first. Sit down with the landlord, tell them what your situation is, and see if they can't remake a payment plan for you without involving East Bay Community Law Center. Sometimes you have to, because then East Bay Community Law Center will step in and formulate a stipulation plan if the landlord is amicable to it.
Mhm.
And then there's also Season of Sharing and Catholic Charities, our regular Echo Housing, our regular places that we refer to. I just don't know what their funding is like right now.
Right. Francisco, you had a question earlier?
Yeah, it's been partially answered, but I think Emma mentioned early on, as Vincentians, if we know of our clients who have a plan, set up a plan with the landlords to kind of pay a monthly amount of money, whatever they can. And my experience is, yes, I have many families here in Fremont that I've been dealing with through Submission the Poll. And they have been talking to the landlords, and most of them, they are cooperating and they are setting a plan in which they pay so much a month. If they pay for rent $1,500 a month, the landlord will be okay if they are able to pay $200, $300 a month. And so they are okay with that. So to answer Emma's questions, yes, that is my experience. And so there is a cooperation between the landlords and our clients as well. Now, as a landlord myself, I've been pretty lucky as a small landlord. One of the rentals that I have, the family is retired, so they've been paying 100% every month. Now I have another rental in Union City, which the owners they have their own businesses, and due to COVID-19, they've been unemployed for 8 months. Again, I've been pretty lucky. They've been paying me about 80%, but they owe me a lot of money. And I established a plan with them in which I allow them to pay whatever they owe until 2021, June 2021, and I was okay with that. So there is a lot of landlords like myself who they are compassionate, and we established a relationship with our tenants. We are able to cooperate together. So I think it's a good thing that many landlords are doing.
That's good to
So that's
hear.
what I have.
Are there other questions among us? Or feel free also to make a comment or just tell us something from your own experience. I know people like Meg Bowerman, who works with an awful lot of different organizations who are struggling to help people in need, probably has a little different perspective from some of the Vincentians in the room. We do have a couple folks here who are from organizations that provide funding to those like us who are trying to do this kind of work, and they probably have a little different perspective. So I'd love to hear from them, but I'll open it up to anyone who wants to either ask a question or speak from their own experience.
Well, Blaze,
Go ahead.
well, just quickly, John knows this too, but Faith in Action East Bay is making a concerted effort to have all their congregations call about AB 15, especially by Friday, even though we have till January 31st. Our push for Faith in Action, I thought it was conservative, was to make 100 calls. And I was able to send this out, and I already have 20 people who've made calls. So if we can all just do, I'll send this to John and you, Blaze, the one sheeter that I sent out to my friends. They just make their calls to their assembly and state senators. And I just think numbers will help. And even though Buffy Wicks is a co-author, don't let that, you still need to make the calls.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Meg. Other questions? Or
This is John Zignoni from St. Albert the Great, St. Philip Neri, and Alameda. This is for Emma or Jackie. What is the status of Project Room Key or Project Home Key at the present time? Or are they both terminated? Is all used up? What is the status? Do you know?
Yeah, I can address that question. I think you all may have heard that a lot of the hotels for Project Room Key are being ramped down mostly because we don't have the funding to pay for the leases continually. But there are a few that are staying open and that they're hoping to convert into long-term housing. I think a couple of them are located in East Oakland. But I think also it's important to note that the Operation Comfort Hotel, which is for people who have tested positive for COVID or need to isolate, that's still open. We do have one location that's still open for people who, especially people who are homeless, if they don't have anywhere to go, they can still be referred over there. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I would add that the majority of people.
How do they make that contact? Where do they make that contact?
I can send you all the list of the referral agencies. There are a few, but there's a number of them throughout the county.
All right, thank you.
And I would add that the majority of people who have moved out of Project Room Key or Operation Safer Ground, at least, have been able to be moved into more permanent housing. And there's also an effort being made, especially in Oakland, but I think in other areas, to purchase hotels that have been temporarily being used so that those can become a long-term permanent supported housing for folks who have been unhoused. So it's
right. Yeah, that's definitely, thank you for mentioning that. I mean, I think that when the program started, we really wanted to focus on how do we actually get people moved somewhere safer or more stable, once their stay is over at the hotel.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Other questions from people in the room? I see one in the chat, and that came from Lisa Marquez Valenti. And you can see that in your chat. Oh, just having to pop off for another call. Okay. Well, thanks for attending, Lisa. Great to see you again as well. Any other questions from folks or comments to make from your own experience? I know most of you in the room are Vincentians and are doing this work. So I'm curious if anyone has someone that they've
in the chat above Lisa, Andrea from Catholic Charities commented on something. Does she want to tell us about this?
Yeah, hi. This is Annie Banbury. Can I ask a question?
Yes, please do, Andrea.
So I work in the housing program in the Oakland Catholic Charities, and for people who need help paying back rent, we have the Keep Oakland House Fund. But then we also use some Season of Sharing and FEMA funds. I'm not familiar with the process for you all, for the St. Vincent de Paul, to help people. So when we can't help somebody, we usually refer them to 211 or Season of Sharing. But I'm wondering if you can talk quickly about your program, and maybe we could refer some of our people to you as well.
Sure. Were you here for the beginning? I gave a little bit of an overview of what St. Vincent de Paul tries to do with eviction prevention.
Yeah, I was a few minutes late, and I've just been looking on your website. So we have an online web form that we're having clients fill out, but should we just give them the phone number for St. Vincent de Paul, or is there a different process that they should go through?
Yeah, so we're broken up into the 2 counties, and if they're in Alameda County, that's probably the best starting point for them to call our main number, 638-600, and they'll reach Jackie these days. And that's a good starting point where we can get a quick assessment of their situation. We can find out more specifically where they live and which of our local chapters might be helping them. If it's a request that chapter is able to even consider. Jackie can save them time if it's just something that we're not going to be able to do at all. And she'll also provide them other resources, as she's mentioned. It probably works very similarly in Contra Costa, but Steve, if you'd like to address any differences, feel free to do that now. And you're muted, Steve.
Hi. Yes, people can call our main number, which is 925-439-5060. We do a lot of working with Season of Sharing. We do a lot with Catholic Charities in partnership, and the conferences. You know, right now it is a collaborative process, and we've got everybody participating. You know, we don't really want to take away people's dignity, and sometimes they can participate. The people that we're trying to help have something that they can do. I don't care if it's $50, right? So that they're participating in their own, you know, in their own solution. But I just want to reiterate, if you haven't worked since February or March and you haven't been able to pay rent, that's bigger than, you know, it's gonna take a long time. And so what we do is stabilize first, which is trying to protect them from being evicted immediately, which right now is paying the September through the end of January's, the 25% with the COVID letter. And then we start, once we have that part covered, then we step back to try and help connecting people to Central Legal, connecting people to the Family Law Center in Concord. There are some cities that have contracted with providers to help people, like Antioch, I know, has actually put a legal clinic under contract to begin to help people. This is going to be a long process. This is not going to go away anytime soon. In fact, to be honest with you, we're just starting. You know, unless something happens on the 20th, we are just starting. So
we are about out of time. I want to give an opportunity for any last questions, but I also, before folks have to start leaving, wanted to mention that I put my contact information in the chat, and we are interested in doing more of these kinds of open dialogues with information to present and with listening to the expertise that comes from the room. And so I'd be very interested in hearing from you if you thought this was especially worthwhile or it wasn't because of A, B, or C. And if you're interested in other topics being discussed in a forum like this, we're very much interested in putting on and hosting more of these types of things in the future. So I'd love to hear from you. I also want, before anyone has to leave, to thank everyone for attending and for the work that you do in this area of helping neighbors who are most in need and literally keeping people in their homes and keeping them from becoming homeless. I want to thank Emma for joining us from Supervisor Carson's office, and Jackie and Steve and John for providing their expertise, as well as the expertise that comes from all of you who are working in the field. Are there any urgent questions that somebody didn't get a chance to ask? I don't want to keep us too late, but I think we could take time for maybe one more if there was something that someone was dying to get out.
Blaze, there was also the Pope Francis Legal Clinic. We might be able to help like on an entry level question. We've been inactive mostly since the pandemic started. We do expect to be active again when the moratorium is lifted.
That's
and
great.
The number for that is a diocesan number. It's 510-893-4711.
Okay. Thank you, John. That's great. Any other last questions that someone would like, or comments that someone would like to squeeze in? Again, please feel free to reach me through the contact information I put in the chat. And thank you all very much for being here and for doing this work. And we will get you out of here just about on time and look forward to seeing you again the next time we do something like this, if not before.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank you,
for
Blaze.
hosting.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Blaze.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for hosting.
Okay.
Thank you, Blaze.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Blaze.
Thank you, John and Jackie and Blaze. Thank you so much for putting this on. This is terrific.
Thanks, Steve.
Great.
You're welcome.
And to Laura and TB, if you're still here, I'd love to hear from you. I see that you sent me a direct message a minute ago. Great. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Okay, thanks.